Hello. For those of people who missed the live webinar on Deep Dive on Edge Microgateway, the entire webinar is available as well. But the way we did the webinar, it was segmented into 4 different sections. If you watch the first 10 minutes, it's about the high level and how the Edge Microgateway works with Edge. Then the second 10 minutes, that includes the demo as well as some of the internals. The third 10 minutes includes the deep dive, how the analytics, quota, spike arrest worked with Edge. And then the last one, we have the Q&A where we answer the questions from the audience. And in the description below, you see this video. There are different links that will take you directly to these sections, so that you don't have to forward and reverse yourself to figure out where it is. It will start from that segment directly. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning from California. This is a beautiful day. We are here to talk about Apigee Edge Microgateway, and we're going to do a deep dive on this. I'm personally very excited about this because I've been involved with this project from day zero. We released this project, the first version of this, back in July, and since then we have gone through several iterations of different releases. Based on the customer feedbacks and based on our own internal feedback. And we recently released Edge Micro 1.1 version, which has got some amazing traction. So I'm very happy to talk to you all about this product as well. So before we get started, about me. So my name is Prabhat. I've been working for Apigee for almost 4 years. Besides building Edge Microgateway for hybrid API deployment, I also lead various projects related to open source design first API development. If you heard about Swagger Node, API Studio, I help with those projects as well. Some housekeeping stuff. Most of these contents, the slides are available on YouTube channels. The webinars recording will be made available there as well. We also have our own SlideShare channel, slideshare.com/Apigee. And if you are interested, after the webcast, if you run into any issues, or if you want to have a follow-up conversation, you can also email us at webcast@apigee.com. Another housekeeping note: we have also a vibrant community of API developers at community.apigee.com, where you can ask about anything, literally anything API, hopefully, and how to do management, how to do the performance, scalability, and all the stuff. And you will see this site is manned by not only Apigee folks but also our customers. And actually, the number of answers that get answered by our customers have gone up recently. So you'll find it very useful as well. Okay. So let's go back to the drill. So the agenda here is that it is about hybrid API deployment. So I'll spend about 5 minutes talking about what an API management is, what are the existing solutions from Apigee, and what kind of problems they solve, and also then we'll transition into Edge Microgateway to talk about what will be the use cases for Edge Microgateway, and then we'll deep dive into the features that are available as of now. Okay, so if you have heard about Apigee, and since you are here, that means you have heard about Apigee. That means you know what API management is. But in a very quick sense, you have your API. Obviously, you need to build it, so you design and develop it. Once you have API, most of the time you're going to build an API for your consumer, whether it's external or internal does not matter. And in that case, you want to secure your API. You have to scale it. It could be because of the internal popularity, or you have lots of app developers using your API. And so that's the building aspects of it. Once API is out there, you want to monitor it, you want to analyze it, and not only the runtime stuff, but you also want to publish the documentation for the API so that people can see what your API looks like, how they can use. So when we say API management, we just not talking about the runtime, traffic, etc., but we're talking about the whole life cycle. That's what API management is. So as you can see in this slide, we have your API consumer, apps, mobile apps, desktop apps, IoT devices, all these devices talking to your API, where Apigee is managing those API for you, and those API may internally then consume some of the data from your data services, whether it's the database, ESBs, and the whole thing. So so that was just you build the API, manage it, and you analyze it and the whole thing. But if you go into the details of what an API management is, there are lots of things an API management provider would have to do. Building is like just publishing your API out there. How do you do the version management? How do you issue key to your developers so that that people making our API call are authorized to make the API call. So related to security, how do you build a partnership with your partner API? Whether it's a customer, brand agency, any of those things, right? So as you can see in this slide, there are lots and lots of features that come out of API management, and then once you have it out, you'd hope that you'll get popular, so you have to scale this thing out. So basically you want to have real-time visibility into how your API program is running, right? So all those things constitute API management, right? And for that you have API Apigee Edge product, that does API management, and you can have Apigee Edge is available as pure cloud, where it's a software, it's a SaaS offering where just sign up and you have your API platform to do your management. You also have Apigee as a private cloud, where whatever we as Apigee run on cloud, the exact same software is available to you to run in your data center. Obviously, then you have to manage your Cassandra instances, you have to manage your LDAP, and you wire them together. It's your responsibility to do that, right? So you have this two end of pure cloud version and pure on-premises data center version, right? So just then, what is the use case of Edge Microgateway? So we'll talk about that. But let's look at this diagram, because this is the one that explains a lot more about what we mean by hybrid deployment. So if you look into the top rectangle, that's your Apigee Edge private cloud or public cloud. So that's what you would use for your runtime traffic. That's where you go to manage your API, but that means making sure that you're applying right security, you're onboarding developers, you can see the analytics, you can monetize your API, all the stuff. That's your central edge. And then on the left side, you have your consumer of API, and the right side is your target application. It's the API, it's your business, you're exposing those things as API, right? So in a typical cloud deployment, you will have your consumer, which could be mobile apps, individual developers making an API call that goes to Apigee Edge installation, and then it goes to your target application, right? So in that case, data in terms of network hops, if you see, it goes from your consumer devices to Edge, then back again to your data center where your application is running, and then the response again goes from your data center to Edge, then to consumer, right? Now let's look on the bottom smaller linear rectangle. You have this Edge Microgateway deployment in the middle that's running in your application environment, and I explicitly do not call private cloud versus public cloud, because you could have your API running in cloud already, but that's your sort of space in the cloud, or you could have it in your own data center physically, not hosted in the cloud, but something that you host yourself. So by application environment, we mean both. So Edge Microgateway can run on public cloud, your public cloud, as well as in your data center. So now you have your services that you are that are running in your data center. Maybe it's your microservices, they're talking to each other. You have internal JAX RS or .NET application that they are talking to each other. The consumer could be, again, your internal colleagues, internal mobile apps that you have. Those are basically closer to where your APIs are exposed, right? But these days you will see lots of customers want to manage even the internal APIs as if it was externally facing, right? And in that case, the features that I showed earlier about the list of things that come out of box from Apigee Edge for API management, not all of those things are needed. You need a lot more linear one, right? So instead of deploying your full-blown, installing full-blown Apigee Edge on your data center, you can just have a lighter weight gateway that gives you a subset of API management features that you would normally get from Edge. And you install it in your application environment. Actually, you can install it on the same server where your target application is running. So they are basically co-located, literally co-located on the sense that they are even hosted on the same thing. And as your consumer traffic goes through Edge Microgateway, everything is happening in your data center. And then Edge Microgateway will coordinate with Edge instance, whether Edge Cloud or Edge Private Cloud, to do the management piece, to show you the analytics data, to do the quota management, things like that. I will go through these features in detail again, but that's the crux of what is Microgateway, is that you deploy this lightweight proxy in your application environment, and it knows how to work with your Edge installation to give you a hybrid deployment of your API. So with that, let's do the next one. So what was the objective? As I said, a lot of our customers, it was totally based on our own use case, as well as lots of customers asked that they wanted a smaller footprint API management. So the objective is to deploy a lean API runtime infrastructure in your application environment, while still you derive the benefits of Apigee Edge in the cloud. The use cases, there are more than 3 use cases that you can see in the slide, but those are the primary use cases that we see. That's how our customers are already using. One is that if you have internal services talking to each other, right, just from the latency perspective, as I was explaining earlier, there's no point for those API calls to go to Edge and come back to your data center, leave data center again, and then come back to your data center. So that just adds some extra network hops. If you have on a reduced latency of the services that are in close proximity, by proximity meaning location, then this fits the bill quite well. Lots of security region, especially the finance services and health services, those APIs, right? Because of the compliance region and things like that, the runtime traffic cannot leave the application environment where your services are running because of the HIPAA compliance, for example, and you've gone through whole security audit to make sure that you comply with the law, and then you want to manage it. Of course, it makes sense for those API to stay in your application environment. So that's another use case where this Edge Microgateway fits the bill, because runtime traffic never leaves Microgateway. It only the metadata about the API, and that's also very light. This is what you see on Edge, and one of the things that I often get asked is that, well, then is it only for internal API? No, of course, the primary initial use case was driven by that they wanted to have internal services talking to each other and manage, but there's no reason if you have some special services, a set of API that is going to be used by your own customers or own employee, but those APIs are exposed as mobile app. Those are not internal APIs anymore. That has been already exposed outside, right? So you can Edge Micro could itself be will be the receiving point of all the API calls, and then it will proxy to your data to your application environment. So the answer is not only for internal APIs only, but the point is that you want to manage those API as if it was being exposed to everybody, and you want to get the visibility into how your API is being used by your consumers. Okay, so hopefully that also that makes it the use case of Microgateway clear. And actually, these are the use case where some of our customers are already using it. So, what does the deployment lifecycle of API managed through Edge Microgateway look like? So, we wanted to have the model of API management very close to what you are already used to doing in Apigee Edge. So you define your proxies. When I say proxy, you usually give a base path and the target API, target application endpoint, right? So when you define your proxy, the way you enable OAuth on it, the way you add quota to it, the way you assign the proxy to product, and the way you give the product to developer apps, everything remain the same. There's no change on that, right? So you define your proxy as if you were, doing a regular proxy development on Edge, and when and then you configure your Edge micro instance that is in your data center application environment to talk to that particular Edge instance. So by Edge instance usually means you give your org admin credentials, give the org name and the environment where your proxy is running on the cloud or Edge private cloud. So you configure them so that they are aware of each other. When Edge Micro starts, that's step number 3 here, it will download a list of all micro gateway enabled proxies and all its attributes, meaning this proxy, it will find out which this Edge Micro enabled proxies are, which products these are part of, what are the developers been assigned to it and all this stuff. It will have all the metadata about this proxy. And then when the runtime hits the micro gateway, it will, based on those metadata, it will do the apply the authentication. It will do traffic management like spike arrest and quota, and it can also enable some of the policies. It will be enforced locally on Edge micro gateway, and then as API calls are flowing through in the background, some API management data will be pushed. One of them will be the analytics. So the analytics data will get pushed to Edge instance, your Edge instance, where you would see the performance, the errors, and all the stuff that you see for a regular API proxy deployed on Edge as if it was running on Edge itself. But in the background, Edge Micro is uploading, pushing data to Edge in the cloud. Of course, we want to optimize the number of outbound and inbound traffics and everything. So we batch things, so the analytics get sent in the batch. And we'll talk about each of those analytics quota feature in a few minutes as well. But so the gist of this one is that you define your API proxies as if you'd have defined normally, and those get managed. Now, one thing to note here. At this point, we get a lot of questions asked with, okay, so if I have if you have, as cloud, you see 15 different policies, lots of, not only 15, actually 50 plus policies. Is there equivalent to all of those policies one by one? The answer is no. We don't, it's not a replacement of Edge, it's very lightweight. If you have to do the whole thing, then your installation, the footprint and the management that you have to do to manage your internal APIs also grows higher. This is for lighter weight API management use case. Then with that diagram, I think I answered this question already, but this is one I also get asked quite a bit. Is it an alternative to Edge versus an extension? It is an extension because it needs Edge for it to work together. It talks to Edge to get the list of Edge micro enabled proxies, what quota you have applied, who are your developers, right? So just by that definition, it's not an alternative; it's an extension. It just allows you to manage your API for internal that are running in your application environment through the cloud. Okay, so the next question. So I'm asking question, answering myself. So those are easy ones. where can it run? So Edge Micro Gateway is built using Node.js. So anywhere Node.js can run, Edge Micro runs. We have lots of customers who are trying it out. They run it on Windows. The Linux, they run it on Amazon Cloud or their own internal cloud. They have been doing it, and it runs perfectly well. So anywhere Node.js runs, Edge Micro Gateway will run as well. Okay, so as I said, there's no one-to-one comparison between features and policies available on Edge Cloud. But what we have is a subset of it, and the way we chose the subset is based on the feedback from the customer. When we launched initially, it was we only had analytics, spike arrest, and quota, and some lighter form of security. But as we listened to customers, we had to add more features. So as of the latest release that you get, Edge Micro 1.1, when for the APIs that are running through Edge Micro Gateway, you will get analytics out of box. You have a way to force a spike arrest on those APIs as well. You have a way to force quota. So in the sense that you have Edge Micro enabled proxies tied to a product and you have applied quota, Edge Micro is aware of what quota policies you have, and whenever developer makes an API call with the token, OAuth token, it will apply the quota and it will enforce the quota same way it would have if the API was running on Edge. In terms of security, the way we do is OAuth 2 is supported, so client credentials, basic auth, and all the stuff. What we do differently for OAuth 2 is that we convert OAuth 2 token to JWT, JSON Web Token, and of course I can't go whole a lot in detail about JWT, but JSON Web Tokens are self-validating in the sense the token itself has enough metadata to tell you about who the API caller is and all the stuff. So when API call is made through JWT, Edge Micro actually does not have to talk to Edge to find out whether the token is valid or not. So that helps with the scalability and performance of Edge Micro Gateway. That is, it's not tied. Once it bootstrap, and if you are doing the JWT security, then basically it will run even if the Edge was not available. Your API traffic will go through. The API key is what we did not have in the first release, and oh my god, that was very bad thing for us to do. Our customers say, no, we have lots of APIs where API keys are not used for security, but more just for tracking, internal tracking. So we just had to do the API key. So the way you would make API call that are proxied through Edge Micro Gateway, everything is the same. Whether API key is added in the header or as a query parameter is totally up to you. Because API key is not self-validating, the Edge Micro, when it sees an API key for the first time, it will make a call to Edge to get the attributes of those key, and then it will cache it locally for the time that you as an org admin have set the time to. By default, it's 30 minutes. So when somebody makes an API call through using API key, all those things will be cached after the first time. So it's not going to make an API call to Edge to every time somebody makes an API call with Edge Micro Gateway. And you can also have custom authentication. So as you'll see part of the demo, where when you enable Edge Micro for your org, we deploy this special authorization proxy to your org, and you are more than welcome actually, and people do customize it so that they can hook up their own LDAP, or they can have their own authentication mechanism. They can modify the expiry time of the token that gets generated, everything. So you can have your own custom security implementation as well. You just have to conform with the format of the token that Edge Micro expects, and that's very lightweight thing to do. The one of the biggest thing that we have added since our first release is ability to write your custom plugin, and think of is like ability to write a custom policy that you do on Edge, right? So one of the things, one of the policy that's very popular among our customer base is XML to JSON and JSON to XML, right? That one, for example, if you wanted to do your own transformation, right? We now give you a standard plugin format where you have to write very few lines of code, and that then you define on where in the request and response path that plugins get executed. And basically, so as request comes through, your custom code will run in the both request and response path. So obviously, the moment you give custom code, it's very powerful. You can shoot yourself. Please don't do that. Use responsibly. There are some good examples out of box. We are adding more plugin examples as we get feedback from customers. The features, for example, OAuth analytics, the features that we use internally in Edge Micro are also exposed as a plugin. So you have actually the real example of how we are plugging ourselves to manage your APIs, right? So there's lots of good examples to get going. And if you need help, as I said, you can always go to community.apigee.com where we respond to questions very quickly. So those are the list of features. Obviously, given the time we have, I won't be able to demo all of them, but I will show you enough that gives you a feel of how Edge Micro Gateway runs. So I'm going to turn on the screen sharing here. And let's see. Do you see the screen? Screen setting up? Okay, thanks. So we have, you should be able to see my screen. So let me show you the edge. Right? So this is my org, and a fresh org should not have many things. So I went ahead and configure. It takes about a minute and a half, and I didn't want it to wait and stare at my screen while I'm configuring. So I basically went ahead and configured Edge Micro with my org. And as I said, it deploys this special auth proxy that converts OAuth token to JWT, that knows how to, that Edge Micro Gateway makes an API call to get some of the attributes. So this gets deployed. This is the only thing that gets deployed out of box when you configure, right? And to verify that Edge Micro is configured properly, we have given you some CLI to do that. But before I show the CLI, when you unzip the Edge Micro software, you will see this is the latest version 1.1 that I have. You will see a few directories: the agent, CLI, docs, gateway, and plugins. Agent is the one that communicates with Edge, downloads the configuration, and then launches server. That server is the gateway. And the plugins is where you write your own custom code that gets executed on the request and response path. And docs simply points to the doc that we have hosted on the cloud for you on the apigee.com/docs website. So those are the things you get. The runtime CLI is just for management perspective, and I'm going to use CLI to do something. So let's see. So I want to go CLI. I want to make sure that the Node version is the correct. We support the latest LTS version from Node.js that recently, I think the latest one is 4.2.3. I have 4.2.2, so it should work. So that Node version, and if you look into it, the CLI, cd bin, we give you lots of options, and the command CLI is very, it has self-help kind of thing. Option to manage agent, get the JWT token, things like configure, and then as you use many features of Edge Micro Gateway, you will have need for some of the other things as well. So there are different options. Now, because I have because everything is configured for me, so what I already did the configuration. I'm going to verify that my configuration is correct or not. So it says, to verify, you need this kind of parameters: your org name, environment, the key and secret that got generated as part of the configuration. So let me just make sure that my command is there. So history grep verify. Okay, so I would give the key and secret that got generated as part of the installation, and my org name and environment. So I'm going to run the 504 command that I run. And it basically goes through and makes sure that it does everything, and you see the verification complete. So the Edge installation, Edge Micro installation I have is complete. Oops, I did not see my prompt here. That's why. Okay, so my configuration is complete. That means I have Edge Micro installed, and believe me, it literally takes less than 2 minutes. So let's go back to go back to the UI. So if it was, I have an API. Let's say we have this accounts.apigee.com/status API. Let's assume that this is the one that we wanted to proxy, right? So I would go here and create a new proxy that with that target. So accounts.apigee.com. The name, we have to differentiate the regular proxy, differentiate between regular proxy and Edge Micro enabled proxy. The way you do that is the prefix right now it's kind of lame, but that's what you do right now. That you prefix the proxy name with Edge Micro _. Of course, we're going to add more support in management UI itself, so that you don't have to stick with these conventions. But that's what you do right now. So you prefix the name and you give it a base path. This could be anything. In this case, I'm going to say SSO, right? That's all. So when I talk about defining your API proxy, this is what I meant, just a base path and where target is. So what I'm doing here is that I'm saying that wherever Edge Micro is running, I'm going to expose I'm going to proxy accounts.apigee.com API with using Edge Micro Gateway, and that will be exposed in the base path of SSO, right? So I'm going to build it, And remember, you configure your Edge Micro with your org and environment. So I had, as part of my deployment, I had chosen prod environment. So I'm going to deploy this this proxy to prod environment, because by default it only gets deployed to test environment. So now that Edge Micro enabled proxy is deployed to the prod environment. Over here, and that's all I have done. Simply define the proxy that has a base path in the target. So let's run it. So as I said, agent is the one that talks to Edge to pull down the configuration. So I can do npm start, which simply runs the node application. I said the agent is listening on this port. Now I have to tell, using the CLI, I have to tell agent to go download the configuration and start the server for me. So in this case, let me just see if I have from the history proc. Okay, so is Edge Micro agent, start a process proc.cs start, and here is the key and the secret. So we don't want, obviously, we have to pair Edge Micro instance with the your Edge instance, right? So that's why this key and secret are very crucial. Of course, you can generate a new key and deactivate previous key and secret, but a unique key and secret pair defines one Edge Micro instance. So I'm going to run it. So I told the agent to pull down the start the server for me. So if you see, it went through all the stuff. I downloaded the JSON web token, so in case later on if I make an API call with JWT, it needs to validate the signature of the token and all the stuff. So that's how the public key is needed. It got the list of the API products, and it does some internal bootstrapping so that it can send the analytics data. It can sync on quota and some of the other metadata about the API that you have with Edge internally, right? So it knows, make sure that everything is there. And you can see here, it also downloaded the list of Edge Micro enabled proxy. Since I only defined one, it has the definition SSO, Edge Micro underscore SSO, and the target and everything, right? If I had more Edge Micro, if I had added more proxy, it will have list of those as well. So it has the Edge Micro enabled proxy. It has a list of products that were there from when I was doing some other demos. It has the public key that it got downloaded, and you can see that the analytics plugin and the OAuth plugin are also loaded for because that's what gets enabled out of box, right? So that's what we have. So what I have done, again, just to recap, is that create this Edge Micro proxy definition on the Edge UI, and basically started my agent locally to do this. So I'm going to make an API call. So since this thing is running on my local host, so I'm going to do curl get, and it shows here it's running on port 8000. You can see on the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to make a call 1000. The base path I gave in the Edge Micro proxy was SSO, and I know that there is an API. So if I go here, do /status, I should see this getting printed for me, because that's what's getting proxied. So if I do /status, oops, typo, status, I got the same response that I had hit, that I saw shown on the browser. So what happened over here? I defined a proxy. I made an API call to Edge Micro running on my laptop, which is in production will be your application environment, and it hit the target. Now, for the demo purpose, the target was running on the cloud, so you could hit it. But this could be something running on your internal server. So it will make those. It will do the whole API request and response flow and everything. And in the background, as the request is being passed through, it will upload the analytics data to the cloud. So let's see if the analytics showed up. Sometimes there is a minute lag. So if demo guards are happy, you will see very quickly. So let's go analytic performance. In the last hour view, I only saw the traffic I'm only seeing the Edge Micro auth traffic. That is a special proxy that gets deployed to org for to enable authentication and OAuth stuff, right? So it already made an API call, Edge Micro running on my laptop, made a call to Edge to download the public key. So those traffic, you can already see the data. I think in a couple of minutes you will see the other proxy come up. But just because there is usually a delay, I ran this same exercise last night, and if I go back, you will see that edge micro underscore SSO proxy does show up over here, right? So if I just want to proxy this, it tells that, at this time I made these many API calls. So what you see is that analytics for API running in your application environment, that you can see it on Edge itself, right? Now I'm not done anything related to security. For that one, you basically, for the demo purpose, I disabled security, but if I were to enable security, this is what I will do. VI config, all those configuration, agent configuration are here. And you can see that auth sequencing is enabled already. But what I did was allowed no authorization, has set it to true. If I were to set it false, save it, I start the agent again. Tells the agent to do its magic. And if I make the API call, because I enable security, I get missing authorization error because I did not provide a token, right? And so how would you have done token normally, right? The way you would do is simply go to the product, you'll create a product, and then you're gonna add this Edge micro enable proxy here, Edge micro underscore proxy to the product, save it, and then if I go to developers, this guy has access to this app which has Edge micro demo product. Then I have his key and secret. So if I make the API call, to get the token and then make the API call, you will see that everything will go through. So our documentation is kick-ass, so you should be able to follow through and maybe I should not have said that word. You should be able to follow the documentation and see it working, but trust me, it does work. So you will basically, by turning on the security flag on, when I made an API call without a token, I got it, right? I got an error. And there's a very simple mechanism to do the spike arrest, the quota, and everything as well. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so that was quick demo of the main thing I want to show was that how the whole internal wiring works and how the analytics shows up. And I just wanted to, by the end of this thing, I'll switch back to demo mode again and show you the analytics that it did got sent to Edge. Okay, so a little bit some internals. I'll go through this quickly. So what really happens during the bootstrap process, right? So I just showed you, we downloaded the public key so that when you do an authentication using JSON Web Token or API key, it knows it has its data. It downloaded the list of Edge micro enabled proxies and also the products, and to figure out which proxy is enabled to which product, so that it can do some internal verification quickly. So that's what happens on the bootstrap process. And if any of these fails, it will tell you the message, and basically you don't have it successfully configured. Then you can just run the verify command again, and it will tell you what is missing here. How does the analytics work? You can have lots of traffic going to Edge Microgateway. The Edge Micro will send data to Edge in batch. So if you have 1,000 API call that went through in last 1 second, it will send all, it will lump all those metadata about those API together and send as one API call to Edge. And if for whatever reason analytics data is not sent because you have some network issues or Edge is not receiving well for whatever reason, we let the data is dropped so that the API traffic, your runtime, is not affected. So we drop analytics data in favor of a smooth running of your API traffic. And if your API, let's say, so your consumer is hitting your API through Edge Microgateway and your target API itself is down, you will see the analytics for those failed API calls on Edge as well. So this gives you visibility of uptime of your API as well on using the Apigee analytics for this microgateway. The next feature, the spike arrest. A spike arrest, you just have a 3 line of in the configuration that I was showing before, you just said this, I want to enable a spike arrest, and it's going to be 10 API call per second. That's what you do, and that enforcement will happen locally in memory, because you don't want to have the spike arrest check to happen against edge, because by that time it may be too late. So that spike arrest is the only thing that you define the configuration locally, not on edge, and that is enforced in memory as well. So it has enforced 100% actually, because there is no lag. The quota, the way you do the quota is that you proxy, create a product as I was showing you, and in the product definition, since most of you are using Edge already, you know how to enable quota on those products, and those will be honored. Now keep in mind that on Edge you have a way to enforce hard quota as well as distributed quota, because we don't want to have a hard dependency between Edge Microgateway and Edge at the runtime. The quota is also distributed in the sense that it's not a, if you define 10 API calls per minute for your consumer, then it's not going to be exact 10. Edge Microgateway syncs with Edge every few, I think by default to 50 milliseconds. I have to check, but that's why it could be off by few count. So you have to be aware that it's not a hard force quota. The OAuth, the pretty much how you enable OAuth for your API is the same. Of course, you don't apply OAuth policy on Edge management UI. That's configuration based, and you basically, your API consumer will given their client credentials, will make an API call to get the token. The only difference is the token is JWT converted to JSON Web Token. And that's how an Edge Microgateway will be able to use that token to figure out this token has access to this proxy and this product, and this is the expiration time, so whether I should let the API call go through or not, right? So it's 99% OAuth, just the format of the token is different, because this is not everything is happening running on Edge itself. The API key flow, the security using API key, as I mentioned briefly before, because it's not self-validating, when Edge Microgateway sees the key for the first time, it has to talk to Edge to get this attribute. And once it has it, it caches it by default for 30 minutes. You can configure it for however you want, how long you want. You can configure it to never expire as well. In that case, as long as your Edge Microgateway is running, it will have the attributes of your API key for that matter. So that's the way. Then once you have the key, then the way it validates the API call is the same regardless of what you're doing. The custom code. So there is I just said we have a mechanism to write a sample code that gets executed in request and response path, right? So I have to switch back to the demo mode again. So just doing it quickly. So we, as part of the examples, we give you lots of some plugins. As I said, analytics, some of the plugins that we use internally itself are made as a plugin. But an example of custom plugin is header uppercase. You want to transform all your header and metadata to the uppercase, so it's a standard Node.js project. It has a package.json, and it's very lightweight though. So in this case, as you can see, all I'm doing here is that whenever I get a request, right, I take the data and I simply write a small code, couple of lines of code to convert the data to uppercase, right? And that's all. So now what I have is that anytime an API call is made, before it gets sent to the target, it will transform it to uppercase and send it to target, right? So, and depending on what you're doing, you can have you have to modify the particular lifecycle methods. So on request data, on data request, on data response, so that you can have it working on the request flow as well as on the response flow. Anyway, so that's wanted to show you how the sample plugin code looks like. Our documentation is very thorough, so you should be able to write your own custom plugin and do that. Lots of our folks internally have written XML to JSON policies using this plugin mechanism already. So to wrap the presentation, then we'll go back to the Q&A, is what is the life of an API call? And this should basically bring the whole presentation to the end, in the sense that when you make an API call with JWT token or API key, or you can disable authentication at all. If you're using JWT, it is self-validating, so it checks whether your token is valid or not. It has this attribute to figure out, whether to let the API call go through or not. For API key, as I said, it has to make a call to Edge to get its attributes, then it caches it. Then based on the given base path, it figures out which Edge Micro enable proxy does it belong to. Does this proxy belong to a product? Is this product approved for this token or API key? Yes, let the API call go through. If the quota is enabled, then we'll check for the quota. If the quota, if you exceeded the quota, it will give you a 403 error. If you have enabled the spike arrest and it's, it has exceeded the traffic that you expect, then it will also return 403. And in the background, and it's syncing the analytics data and the quota data to Edge in the background. So that's the life of an API that is flowing through Edge Microgateway. Hopefully this should make clear. Again, just to recap, Edge Microgateway is an extension to Edge, not a replacement. It's not a one-to-one mapping, in the sense that not all the policies are available here. Just by nature, if you have to implement all those policies, that means we have to have your own data store, on Cassandra, LDAP, and all those stuff. And the reason, if you want to use that, if you want to still have a need for to have the full blown, you can still go and manage the Edge private cloud yourself. But we consciously chose to have a smaller set of features to make it lighter weight, and that does actually solves quite a bit of API management problem for smaller use cases, mostly for internal APIs where latencies are of a higher concern because services live close together, and also for the security and compliance region, your runtime traffic cannot leave your data center, so you still want to manage those. So those are the use cases for Microgateway. So that's the end of the presentation. Let's see if we have questions. We have lots of questions. Can I have my app do some caching in Apigee Edge? That's also one of the frequent questions we get asked. See, if you do caching and that cache is just stored on Apigee Edge, then that means for every API call, it has to hit Edge to get the cache data. That defeats the purpose of running Edge Micro in your application environment, right? Yes, you could write a custom plugin that stores that fetches this thing, but that will be very counterproductive to the why you would use Edge Microgateway. Next question from Vineet: can we do lightweight transformation from XML to JSON, etc., using Microgateway? Yes, you can. As I said, some of our folks have done it already. Likely in the next release, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll make this plugin available out of box. Question from Vinita: where you will be placing dev portal and which org will it point to? I think none of those things will change. If you want to expose your internal API through a dev portal, then you go through the setup of making sure that it's only available to internal people through security mechanism, all the stuff. Nothing changes. Edge Micro is only about running runtime where you run it. Everything, all the rest of the management and publishing, you do it as if you have been doing with a regular Edge. Another question from Arpit: for high volume API, can we scale up Edge Microgateway by installing multiple Edge Microgateway? Yes. Thank you for asking this question. Very good question. So basically, Edge Microgateway is a very lightweight Node.js application. And if you need to scale, there's no state stored, so you can fire as many instances as possible. You just run that with a load balancer like Nginx, HA proxy, any of those things would work. And you can auto scale it down, and the way you manage it, because it's running in your application environment, whatever the mechanism you have for spinning the server up and down, installing, you do the same process to get that going. So the answer is yes. I answered that. Andy: for security, could you please show how access token is generated based on API key? I could show you. I don't think we have enough time. If you do not get it working following the documentation, please reach out to me or reach anybody. Ask your question on community.apigee.com and we'll have it answered for you. I promise. Some Kumar, how Apigee Cloud is connecting with the enterprise backend? Is kind of any secure tunnel? Yeah, so for communication that happens between Edge Micro Gateway and Edge, everything happens over HTTPS. How you want Edge Micro to talk to your API, that's up to you. Himanshu, can versioning be configured for API target services using Edge or Edge Micro Gateway? Edge Micro Gateway, for if you want to have a different version of your same API, then you will just create a different Edge Micro _proxy that I created for each version, and then you just tell your consumer which Edge Micro instance to hit. Yes, so directly or indirectly you should be able to do that. For an internal application, in order to get the JWT token, it will have to make a call to Edge Cloud, right? Yes, you will have to, like you get the API token or the JWT token, you have to make Edge Cloud, but you could proxy that call through Edge Micro Gateway as well, so that your consumer is only hitting one API hosted on one domain, not multiple domains. So there's a workaround for that. Again, if you run into some issues, feel free to open a ticket or ask question on the community.apigee.com. Can we cluster those micro instances like one for internet and intranet? Let me understand the question. So you can cluster, you can have multiple groups of Edge Micro deployment. They are not aware of each other. How you proxy them together, how you build them together and expose it through a load balancer like Nginx, up to you. But you could have a one for internet and intranet built, and it's up to you, how do you expose it. So looking at most of the questions, the gist is that one Edge Micro Gateway can proxy multiple targets. How you want to expose which APIs get which endpoint and how you group them together. We give you lots of option through the naming convention as well as the environment name and org name, where you can manage these things, right? Edge Micro downloads the metadata which grow huge for large enterprise. Does it support segmentation to specify the metadata? This is another great question from Himanshu. So basically, let's say I have lots of Edge Micro enabled proxy. If every Edge Micro Gateway were to download all this metadata for all those things, it would be a huge list. Actually, even though it looks huge to us, in terms of the data side, it's not huge. So unless you have like 50,000 products and things like that, then there might be something to worry. But if you have like 10,000 developers or 1,000 products, it's still not a whole lot of data. But this question has been asked by a lot of customers actually. So we are thinking of having a grouping mechanism where we say this pool of Edge Micro Gateway is enabled for these products and that. We don't have that in the current version, but that's something we will work on. Can Edge Micro work with on-premises hosted Apigee Edge? Yes, in the first version we released, it did not, but the latest one works with, so as long as you have on-premises version 1507 and later, it should work. Himanshu, for Edge Micro Gateway specific configuration as local, how the changes to be done? So anytime you make a change on local configuration, you have to restart Edge Micro Gateway. So, and that's usually not a big problem, especially if you have multiple Edge Micro Gateway running behind a load balancer. You can do a rolling restart, and everything should be fine. But if you don't have a load balancer, then yes, you do have to restart for the new changes to get effect. However, the attributes like token and attributes of those token, those does not need to be restarted. But anything like you activate a new plugin, or you apply one of some other security mechanism, or change some of those behavior, then some things do require restart. This is the last question from Himanshu. For custom plugins to develop on Micro Gateway, what tech stack is supported to use external library? Anything that can run as in Node.js. It will run like, everything has an app. Actually, everything has a Node module. So that's why we chose the Node.js framework to begin with for custom plugins, because pretty much everything that you want to do in Node is already done by somebody, or if it's not, going to be very little code that you have to write. So the tech stack is that you write the plugin and pure Node.js. The Java call out and those things are not supported. It's all Node.js right now. Okay, so I think I answered pretty much all of this. So hopefully, thanks for asking those questions. And as I said, if you have any question, feel free to come to community.apigee.com. We are also very active on Twitter, so you can hashtag Apigee and we'll answer that as well. Okay, that's it.